afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me as we take a look at your weekend forecast for January 23rd through 25th. We're obviously going to talk quite a bit about the storm. Also, the extreme cold, a lot going on weather-wise. And I will definitely be back tomorrow with an update at this look at this forecast. But yeah, lots going on. We've got snow total predictions, at least the first call. That'll probably need to be revised. But yeah, a lot going on. Now, a couple things. First, don't want to jump the gun too much towards the storm. I know that's what everybody's interested in. Here's it starting to develop. But first, you can see a weak Arctic, or not a weak, I shouldn't say, you can see the outlines of an Arctic front. Not a lot of moisture associated with it, although a few flurries, lake-enhanced flurries this morning. But you can see this looks like clouds. This is not clouds. This is just how cold it is at the surface. It's so cold at the surface that it looks like there's clouds in the atmosphere. The way that we get this satellite imagery, it's infrared light that is being reflected to the satellite, or to the satellite camera that's taking a picture of it. And usually that's done off of clouds at high elevations in the atmosphere. So cold equals higher cloud tops. However, sometimes the surface gets so cold that it starts to look like there's clouds there, but that's just cold temperatures. Very cold temperatures. So that's headed in our direction. Actually, not as cold where we are as it's going to be in the upper Midwest. These are 20, some 30 below zeros in Minnesota this morning. So yeah, real cold. We're not going to be that cold, at least air temperature wise, but when you include the wind, which is going to be gusty tomorrow into Saturday, or sorry, it's tonight into Saturday, it will feel like 30 below in many places. We have an extreme cold warning actually for southern Vermont. Which means just what it says it does. Tomorrow is going to be brutally cold. Then all eyes turn towards our system here, which is also going to grab some energy from a northern stream system and barrel across the country with a massive kind of winter storm that will affect areas all the way from Texas to New England. So with all sorts of stuff going in between, it's going to be all snow here. Let's take a look at radar. Again, you can see kind of that Arctic front and that push of cold air that's behind that Arctic front, which is providing some of the contrast from very cold air to relatively warm, moist air across the Gulf. You can see, we'll take a quick look closer into home. You can see that here we have a few snow flurries around. Nothing that's going to be too exciting. Huge lake effect band that's hitting the Tug Hill Plateau in upstate New York, but and some flurries occasionally from that, but nothing that's going to cause any issues today. But also some of this is with the front. You can kind of see there's a little bit of a motion to this. This is kind of the front, the Arctic front sagging through. So if we take a look at temperatures, and I said it was cold, it's not that cold now. These are the warmest temperatures currently outside that you're going to see probably through all of next week. It's going to be a cold week next week behind the snow. It's going to feel like definite winter. So just kind of be prepared for that, ready for that. But across the central part of the country, we see cold air has really locked itself in. Minus 20s, minus 30s, even across the United States, certainly up into central Canada, a lot of minus 20s and 30s. Very cold. Even for these areas, this is pretty cold, quite cold. Not like record cold, but quite cold. We're going to be below zero, certainly tonight and again on Saturday night. And with some wind tonight and tomorrow during the day is really when the heart of the coldest of the air comes on top of us, which is why tomorrow highs are going to struggle to get much above freezing, or I'm sorry, much above zero, not above freezing, much above zero. But you can see there is some warmer air and that contrast, that huge contrast from 50s and 60s here in South Texas to places in Oklahoma that are down close to zero, even below zero, sorry, Kansas that are below zero. That temperature contrast is part of what's fueling the storm as well. So if we look at the pieces, here's the ingredients. Two main ingredients for this storm. They're still quite a ways apart. We still got a lot of development to happen. This piece of kind of upper level low that has been kind of off the coast of California and is now starting to come onshore and kind of is going to move across basically right along the Mexico or Mexican United States border, maybe just south into northern Mexico, and come across Texas is the piece that's going to trigger the surface low pressure that is going to kind of get things going. But the reason it's going to turn and kind of the reason that it's going to continue to develop and the reason a coastal storm is going to develop on top of it has to do with this piece of energy from the northern stream of the jet stream coming over the top. And the two are going to not entirely phase. This storm is interesting. It's going to be has a lot of effects over a huge swath of area, a lot of moisture involved. It's actually not going to be the most wrapped up storm you've ever seen, which is part of the trickiness in terms of figuring out what's actually going to happen weather-wise. But in general, these two pieces coming together, interacting, that are going to make our storm happen. So let's take a look at my next graphic here, which is going to give you an idea of the storm track as I see it now. It's a little, I probably could have made this in a way that made a little bit more sense. But here tonight, the storm is still way western Texas, El Paso area, maybe even like Juarez, Mexico kind of area. Storm sort of tracks across Texas. And then west of the Appalachians, we call this a Miller-type B storm. If you're familiar with, this is like the academic literature in meteorology. You don't need to be familiar with it, but it's a type of coastal storm where you basically get redevelopment. And so what's going to happen is as the storm starts to pull up west of the Appalachians, it's going to transfer its energy. And part of that is that kick from the storm, from the upper level, transfer that energy offshore. And then originally, it was looking like about a few days ago, like it would probably kind of continue on a relatively eastward motion. But the longer we've got, the more that this, the secondary area of energy and mid upper level energy has moved south from Canada, the more it has kind of changed the direction of travel of the low pressure system. So the low pressure system is going to stay much closer to the coast and go in a more southwest to northeast direction. Models show some model differences of it. Some of it have this a little flatter, which would leave us with a little bit more snow. But basically that puts this in a good storm track location for us with extreme cold in place. So in terms of getting snow across southern Vermont and interior New England. And really, this one's going to be snow all the way to the coast. Boston is probably all snow for this. I don't think there's going to be any mixing there. You never know. Right at the immediate coast, the Cape certainly could get some sleet and rain even mixing in the islands. But basically, it's a snowstorm for all of New England. More on that later in terms of thinking about precipitation totals and things like that. But this is a pretty common, this is not an unusual, this is one of these types of storms that does develop across the eastern part of the United States. What's tricky is how cold it is and how dry it is currently to us. So the models have definitely continued to go in pretty solidly with significant snow, but I am convinced we are going to get plenty of snow. And you'll see that in my forecast. Probably the biggest snowstorm we've had yet this winter. So but there have been indications from models at times that we might get instead of, so I'm thinking basically 8 to 12 for a lot of us, maybe a little bit more for the higher elevations. And if you go far north, maybe a little bit less. But basically 8 to 12 inches over a lot of southern Vermont. There has been some indications of that at times from models of more snow. And you probably, if you have apps on your phone, they're probably all over the place with this storm. But if you've seen, there's a million people who do weather online. So some of their forecasts are everywhere. I've definitely seen a lot of 16 to 20, even some 20 to 24 inch snowfall forecasts for southern Vermont. I am skeptical we will get to that height. It's not an irresponsible forecast if the models if particularly the European model played itself out. However, I think, and the European model is usually the best model, I would say. The GFS is, they not always, and it's storm dependent, but oftentimes the European model is the one I would rely on. It's probably the best global model. But that being said, it is not entirely, when it is this cold, I have, over the years, it has generally been the case that models overestimate how quickly we are able to saturate the column of air and it takes a while for that to happen, and it kind of sometimes limits the front end amount of snow. Not a guarantee though. Also, the other thing that I have just over the years generally been the case, this is more the case for like what more wrapped up storms than this is going to be. This never becomes like one of these storms where you're going to take pictures of the satellite image and say, oh, it looks like a hurricane. It'll never get that strong. So, but when a storm really wraps up, oftentimes if it's snow in Boston, a lot of interior New England does not do as well for snow. So those are my kind of two pieces of information that have got me coming in a little bit lower. I'm not that much lower. I'm pretty close to what the National Weather Service is saying, for instance. But I'm maybe a little bit lower than some of the other stuff you might have seen online. So let's take a look at those actual those actual forecasts. 8 to 12 is mostly what we get in the southern four counties in Vermont. If you get the further north you get a little further away from the storm, I think 6 to 10. This will be very light and fluffy snow, a little bit of elevation enhancement, 10 to 14. Now, this is one of these storms where there will be probably a couple of, usually with a storm, you've got a band that happens relatively close to the storm, maybe 100 miles northwest of the storm. That'll be well south of us. The storm's going to be probably about 200 to 250 miles south and east of southern Vermont when it crosses by us. Sometimes you get those bands about 100 miles north of where the storm happens, and then a secondary band further out. If we should get under a heavier band, these numbers can go up. This is the hard part about snow forecasting, right? And it won't take much liquid, because we're going to be getting probably, oftentimes we get about 10 inches of snow to an inch of liquid equivalent. Sometimes a foot is probably climatology in southern Vermont, because our snow's a little fluffier than it is in some parts of the country, generally just because it's a little colder here. But this snow will probably be 15 inches, at least, maybe even a little bit higher to 1 inch. So it doesn't take a lot of change in the amount, right? Like if we get 6/10 of a liquid equivalent versus 9/10, it could, normally that would be already like a 3 to 4 inch difference in snow. Now it's like a 6 inch difference. So it's not impossible that these numbers could go up. I think we're pretty solidly going to get, I would be surprised if we got less than 8 inches of snow in the southern part of Vermont here. I would be surprised, but more is still somewhat possible if a band really sets up. And unfortunately with those, until it's kind of happening, we're definitely too far out to know for sure on that. The models have not indicated any kind of banding there, but we're too far out to really get the short-term kind of models. That's really the kind of thing that by tomorrow afternoon we might have an idea on, and sometimes you don't even know till it's happening. So it's not impossible that these numbers wouldn't be correct. But I do think in general, this is my idea for what's going to happen with the storm. Let's take a look at what's happening for the storm details, because some of this is going to matter in terms of travel and things like that. Snow likely begins during the afternoon on Sunday. I think travel probably through 1, 2 o'clock, you're basically safe in southern Vermont. Beyond that, sometime after that, snow starts to pick up. It will be cold, so snow will accumulate on the road relatively quickly. It will be the kind of snow that is not bad to drive on. It will not be slippery to drive on, really. It will be snow covered, so you got to be careful, but it's not like slippery in the way that like warmer snow sometimes can be. It will also be the kind of snow that salt is not going to touch, really, because it is going to be very cold. So the roads will stay snow-packed a little bit longer. Snow is heaviest overnight, but will continue through midday Monday. So overnight, we could certainly see snowfall rates of 1 inch an hour, maybe even a little bit more. And particularly if we get in a band, maybe a little bit more. So that's one of those, if you get in a band that's 2.5 inches an hour for 3 hours, all of a sudden you have 7.5 inches of snow, and then you add on the 7-8 inches we're going to get. So that would be how you'd get more snow if you ended up something like that. The biggest storm of the winter yet, I think, but not something out of the ordinary for Vermont. The one thing about this storm, it is a huge storm in lots of parts of the country, an unusual storm in many parts of the country that they don't see maybe about once every few years, 10 years maybe. It will not be that kind of storm here in southern Vermont. We see a storm like this almost every winter. So do not be, that's just kind of the reality of a big storm like this in lots of of more populated parts of the country. We get lots of news about it, but this is the kind of storm we get once or twice a winter on average, and sometimes even more than that. So big, but nothing crazy. If you're wondering about school on Monday, basically you can guarantee no school on Monday. For the weekend forecast, because this still does matter, if you're here to ski early in the weekend, today's not too bad. Temperatures in the low 20s, a few flurries around, but mostly we could even see a couple of peaks of sun, particularly this afternoon. Tonight, frigid, breezy, -5, wind chills easily 25 below zero tonight. It is dangerously cold outside tonight. Got to make sure that if you ever have issues with ice, with pipes freezing and things like that, got to be aware of that. Tomorrow, very cold during the day, breezy, high temperature of 4 with wind chills well below zero all day, even in the valleys. Skiing tomorrow, it's kind of doable. Probably only if you're an adult, and you need to have good gear, and you're probably not going to the tops of mountains. It's probably limited to the bottom half of mountains. So just know that it's going to be very cold. My guess is, bases of a lot of our mountains, we're going to be below zero even at the base. If you get up to mid-mountain, you're 10 below zero, 15 to 20 below for a high at the tops of some of these mountains. It's going to be very cold, and the wind will still be gusty tomorrow, so wind chills are going to be, way below zero. So just know that tomorrow's going to be, it's a tough day to ski. Doable if you're a diehard, you can get out there and do a few runs. That's fine. If you've got good winter gear and you're not taking more than a couple runs and then going in and getting warmed up, but it's going to be brutal. Sunday, definitely also, Sunday will be cold. The wind dies down. So if you're going to ski on Sunday, particularly in the morning. It'll be great. In the afternoon, except for some travel issues as you're coming home. A pretty good day to ski on Sunday. Still cold, but definitely much more doable on Sunday. Afternoon snow, like I said, overnight snow. The snow continues through about midday on Monday. Let's take a look at those details, just to kind of give you one final thing. I know this video has been very long, but just kind of giving you an idea of what's going on. Cold weekend ends with our largest snow storm of the winter. Friday will be very cold and windy. Sunday will also be cold with less wind, but snow starting later in the afternoon, and that continues Sunday night into Monday. Next week, like I said, looks cold. I don't think we see 20 again for the foreseeable future, at least through the end of next week. I think we're in the teens for highs at best, with lots of nights down near zero or a little bit below. So it's just going to be a cold stretch. The pattern is better set up for these kind of bigger storms in general, whether they happen going forward. They tend to be a little less frequent. So if you're sick of the snow, like flurries every few days that you got to clean off, clean things off because you're getting 2 or 3 inches of snow, that's less likely in the pattern we're kind of moving towards, but bigger storms are more likely. And so we'll just have to see if things come together for that to happen again. There's some indications of a possibility for that next weekend, but way too early to tell. So that's what's going on. Thanks for supporting the channel. I do want to give a shout out to my patrons to help support what I do here at the West River Weather Guy. If you haven't subscribed to the channel before, I'd encourage you to do so. Helps make sure you don't miss any videos. And if you're interested in becoming a patron, just make sure that you get my weekend forecasts on Wednesday that I do for my patrons. And also there's a thing where you can get a 10-day forecast every Wednesday from me. So just kind of keeps you up to date on what I'm up to. And you can go to my Patreon page and just jump on as a patron. I appreciate that. My patrons, I appreciate what they do to help support the channel. I'll be back tomorrow with another forecast